Okay, cool. There's bed in the holding area right there too. Or you want to go that way?
Why don't you tell them who you've played in the Star Wars universe? Bring them up to speed.
Well, right now I'm Buzz Lightyear in the new show. And if you go to Disneyland, I'm Darth Vader, if you go meet him. And General Tarbles, a few of the other shows. I play Qui-Gon Jinn, the Zilla Beast, the Slave. Right here, too dirty. This is what I was writing. Oh, sorry, you got a microphone.
You're sexy, but you don't get too much.
Oh, princesses. Qui-Gon Jinn, General Tarple, Zilla Beast, Bolsa Gruul, did a lot of stuff for the games, a lot of Wookiee talk, and other Jedi and Sith. So, it's great to see you guys. Portia.
I mean, it's very good to see you.
Nice surprise, huh? Pretty good. Yeah, so we're really sad that James and Vanessa could not be here with us. But they're out making money and stuff.
No, Governor Price finally got all of them.
We have nothing better to do, so we showed up. No, we love you guys. Thank you for having us here. I'm Steve Bloom. I play Set Radios on Star Wars Rebels. And thank you for that one person who knows. And 1/3 of all the stormtroopers in the games and in that show and in a couple of movies now too. I got to be in Solo and Rogue One. I was actually one of the guys who said kill them slower when Chewie and Han first met each other. So, yeah, so another reason to hate me. Yes, yes. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is my Governor Price.
Hello, I'm Mary Elizabeth McGlynn and I play Governor Price in Star Wars Rebels. Oh, Rebels Star. All of you. All of you. I also play Freya Fenris in Star Wars Resistance, along with 40 men and Jukes, and I'm also Star Wars Resistance voiceover director as well. So, yay!
That's Sabine.
That's Sabine.
Not Tia Sarkar, unfortunately. I'm Zoe, and I run the Star Wars Speaker podcast with Lizzie Perales, who's the first Sabine. And I'm here with you guys today.
Okay.
Thank you. She's here to keep us out of jail. That's basically what that is. Yeah. Is there a plan for this?
I have questions.
Oh, okay.
Let's answer questions.
So do I have a lot of questions.
Oh, also, we brought, for the weirdest question from the audience later, if we get two really weird questions, we have two of these that we're going to sign for you guys.
We also have some at our tables down in the dealer hall, or up in the dealer hall. This is down. It's the upside down. I don't know if you've noticed that, but we've been in there for a while now.
Come visit us down there.
Yeah, well, 15 minutes at the end, so think of questions now. Think of weird questions now, apparently. So my first question is just, how did you get involved with Rebels? Like, how did that go for you?
Well, I auditioned, and I remember getting the audition and looking at it, and it was for something called Wolf. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then some of the dialogue had something, a description with a light sword, and I went, oh, well, that's interesting. And then at the end of the audition, the character was supposed to be choked by an unseeable force. And I remember turning to Steve going, I think this is for Rebels, because Steve had already been on it for, I think this was for season 3. So, and I just said, Baba, I think this is for Rebels. And when I got the part, Dave Filoni came out, my first record, and came out in the lobby and he said, you know, Mary, you didn't get this because of Steve. You got it because of you. And I was like, oh, Dave, thanks. Good to know.
He did the same thing for me when I worked on Resistance recently. I auditioned for a part of the show. I played a trooper who just got beaten up over and over and over again, dragged around. And they told me when I walked in the room, by the way, this has nothing to do with Mary. You actually got this on your own merits. We don't do that here, so.
On your own merits.
On my own merits, yeah. I found out the show similarly. It was called Wolf when I auditioned for it as well, and I didn't know it was Star Wars at the time. There were indications of troopers on the thing, but you see that in so many different things. And it looked like a military character that I was reading for. We didn't have pictures, we didn't have anything to go by. Even once the callbacks at Disney, and sitting in front of everybody from the Rebels crew, and they're grilling me through this thing, and I think at that time they probably told us it was for Star Wars, but it just didn't sink in. It wasn't until I actually booked it. I happened to be in Birmingham, England for a Transformers convention, and I get a phone call from my agent saying, you need to go to a studio. We're going to send you out to this studio at somebody's house out in the country. We're going to hire you a cab and just go out there and they'll have your script. And I didn't know what it was. I had forgotten about doing the audition for Rebels, and it wasn't called Rebels still. And I go to this house and I'm lost in this neighborhood. This sweet elderly couple comes out. They look like mom, like an English version of Ma and Pa Kettle. And right this way, dearie, come on in. And they bring me into this studio on the second floor of their beautiful old home. And I walk up in there and there's no air conditioning and I'm sweating and they give me the headphones and Filoni is on the phone on the other side. And I just hear this voice that sounds familiar, but I didn't really know him very well. And he goes, okay, Steve, so we decided that we're gonna go with whatever the accent was that we worked at the time. We ran through a whole bunch of different accents. And he goes, and you're gonna be killing a stormtrooper. And I see stormtrooper in the script as he's saying this, and all of a sudden I went, oh my God, this is Star Wars. This is Star Wars! The inner fanboy squeal must have been outward because they all laughed and it was amazing. So that's when it really set in that it was Star Wars. And being a Star Wars fan since 1977, that excitement never stopped. Every single time we did a session from that point forward, I still felt that the same hairs on the back of the neck that I felt in 1977 when I first saw the Imperial Destroyer go overhead and felt the rumble. So anyway, it was a really weird experience getting in, but it never got old. Freddie, what was your experience getting on the shows? Because you worked on a bunch of the Star Wars shows.
Yeah, it was the same as you. I love that. I'd love to know what else they recorded in Birmingham. Was that in Birmingham where you did that? That's so cool. I really, for me, it's just been, again, I'm such a huge fan. For me, it's just the same thing. It's just been auditions. You just try to, they send you a description. And again, you start to figure out what's what, because you do see, I think they called the Force the knowledge or something at one time. It's like, and now the knowledge is strong with him. I'm like, no. Because they try to keep it, under wraps. So for me, yeah, it was just auditioning and my inner geek just, freaks out anytime I work on a video game or anything, or someone asks you to do an iconic character or try to be a Wookiee for a number of projects, and what's weird is I had a project where they had translations of what the Wookiee was saying. So you had to make up how that would, okay, I'll meet you at the cargo bay. I'm really upset about this. But I don't know if you guys found that, they're pretty loose about, even Huttese or anything. If you speak Klingon, you have to speak Klingon. This is really they're pretty open, which is very exciting. And yes, that's just generally it. Just being being around and auditioning. You know,
And the three of us are old enough to have actually been in, at least the two of us are, to see it in 1977.
Yeah, I was very young, but I didn't understand. I was able to go into the theater, but I didn't quite understand the immensity, like what exactly was happening.
I was 17 or didn't understand the
Yeah.
I didn't want to see a stupid space movie with an octopus in it, because they used to have like lobby cards, and they had the shot of Luke, you know, in the trash compactor with the thing around his neck, and I was like, is this like some octopus space movie? Because the original commercials for it, the trailers, didn't have John Williams music, and it was, we've got a space adventure coming at you, and it was really cheesy music, and the thing wasn't color corrected. It just looked terrible, you know. So I was like, this looks awful. We've waited 3 hours because it was sold out, you know. I was such a little jerk. And then seeing it, I was just, that downbeat was it for me. It was
we were all blown away
I don't
the
think
first
I
time.
believed for 2 minutes. It was
Yeah.
amazing. Never ever dreamed that I would be a part of this
I
universe.
know. It's pretty crazy.
It's really true.
Yeah, it's
Funny what you were saying about the Wookiee things. I spoke Aqualish and Huttese for a bunch of different projects. And I wanted to get it right. And I was doing all my research online. They said, no, we don't care. Just make it up. It's
Yeah, you have to say certain lines.
There are
Right?
certain
things that like, knuckle top, like certain things.
It
Yeah.
has to be
Phantom
agreed with it.
Voodoo has to be very correct.
That kind of, lots of
It's funny,
phlegm.
weird having to play a version of Jabba that spoke basic, that spoke English,
Yeah.
you know, because they realize, oh, some of them do actually speak
Yeah.
basic, you know, they just have chosen not to, you know,
Yeah. If you've seen the Star Wars Resistance trailer for our next and final season, you will see that we have a new Hutt on the show who does actually speak English.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is pretty great.
I want the Wookiees though, they're like, yes, I'm speaking true, but I choose not to.
Sounds like Hebrew.
Sounds like you're underwater. It's like, underwater Wookiee.
Did we even answer your question? I don't know.
Is the panel over? Talk all the way through.
Alright, well, it's fine. My next question was, how did you prepare? I know you said you worked through different accents, so like, what kind of preparation did you do? Like, I know you said like, too, like the lines. So like, when you go for a role, what do you work through, I guess?
For me, it's an organic process. I look at the words in whatever direction I'm given. Hopefully, if they give you a picture, it creates pictures in my mind, and I just build something around that. For Zeb, the original direction, I think, was they wanted something that sort of sounded European-ish. He was a big hulking character. That's all they really told me. He was a soldier. So I started with a real thick Cockney accent. Then I brought that in the studio for the callbacks. And they said, yeah, that's great, but nobody will understand what you're saying. So they ran me through German and Russian and French and Italian. We went through a whole bunch of different accents. And what we landed on was basically a crappy South London with a little bit of Australian sprinkled in. And it just seemed to work for the character. By that time, we actually had a model of the character to look at. And the way he walked, the way he moved, there had to be something that rhythmically would work with his cadence too. He's almost simian, the way he functions. So this worked pretty efficiently for him. I could take my beats and pauses when I needed to, that sort of thing. And he cussed a lot, but you know, the Disney-friendly cuss word, Carabast. But we ran it through with the pieces of dialogue that they gave us at the callback. I think we ran it through probably 20 or 30 times before we settled on what ultimately they used for it.
And Governor Price, all the Imperials were always English, you know, so my grandfather was English, so I've been messing around with that accent for a long time, but her level of arrogance and condescension it was one of the easiest characters I've ever had to play. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, all I had to do was stand there like this, and all of a sudden Governor Price came into view. And it was so easy, it was really scary. Like, I was like, this is like, she has an iPad for torture. This is awesome! And I was just like, oh, there's something wrong with me, that it's really one of the easiest characters for me to get into that I've ever played. Yeah, I don't know why. It's just because, I just thought of that rod strategically placed up at the bum, and I'm just like, well, that's Governor Price, isn't it? And just all this, I don't know, it was so much fun. It's so much fun to tap into someone just that embracingly evil, that she just loved it, she didn't apologize for it, and it was a very, I feel like the villains are really easy to play sometimes, because their intentions are so clear, there is no conflict, it's just like she wants power, and the only conflict comes from when she can't get it, and that makes her angry. And like Hulk, you don't want to see Governor Price when she gets angry. Because if you don't know, Fred is also the
I feel angry. Don't want to do it.
But for her, it was just very simple to sort of go just rather Helen Mirren, British, I'm a huge Downton Abbey fan, so I just sort of, oh, there was a great, it was in Sense and Sensibility. Have you guys seen it, the Emma Thompson version of Sense and Sensibility? And there's one of the sisters was sort of very, and she had this awful sort of arrogance to her, and it was very nasal. So I kind of placed it in there instantly, and that was it. Governor Price. Evil.
And we so opposite you in so many ways, and I love how easy it is that you got to go into it.
Well, except for the torture part. That
I know.
she likes that.
That's why I'm a director.
What about you?
What about me?
Yeah.
How do I get into certain voices? Oh gosh. Well, let's see, for Bolza, we worked together on that, and so it was just really trying to find, for that one it was helpful to know who else was in, what other the other characters were, because I wanted to kind of do something that was different, because I play a lot of very big voiced characters and stuff,
And kind of understand where his humor was, because a lot of it is he just,
it's almost like his downfall or his demise kind of led, as opposed to a vocal thing, it was more of an attitude.
like he's selling these things, he doesn't quite know what they do, but maybe it'll work out. And
there's a kind of a weird heart of gold he has, but he's really definitely the comic relief in many ways. So he's kind of
frustrated mostly, but he can be led to something positive. But I'm just kind of aggravated.
You kind of just take a color and go with it, and see where it leads.
For him, it was finding how low he was going to be and how angry, and at what.
You know what I mean? He'll beat beats the stuffing out of somebody, but he's kind of a chicken.
It was also you and D. Baker together in the same room.
See, like little D doing this kind of voice. Yeah, so he's kind of in here.
Yeah, and they were perfect balance.
Gentlemen, Jeff, like, just shut up already. Let's just do this thing.
And it was so that was kind of where the voice came out. I was trying to see what would be the balance between other folks, like D especially, because we're together. So yeah, I was for that character. But then for some of the others, I'm voice matching, but for Qui-Gon Jinn, it was just become that what I knew from Liam. Just that was like. Let me think. For Zilla Beast, it was just a big creature. I had to do, and General Tarpos, of course, I had to base it on what the Gungans sort of sound like, but just sort of make it my own and make him a little different, yes. And calm and heroic. So it was more like emotional beats, really, that led the voice, really.
So sort of bouncing off what you said about D. Baker, is there a character that you like to work with, like as Price or Zed, that you thought was fun to bounce off of?
Well, Clancy Brown and I used to get in the studio all together all the time, which is really fun because I direct him on Tangled. So to actually be on the same side of the glass together was so much fun because we give each other so much grief. So I always loved when Clancy and I would be in the booth together because they would always throw random X-Wing pilots, and Clancy's one line was, "No, no, no, explosion." And I was like, "Clancy, there's only one way to read this line." And he's like, "What?" I was like, "No, no, no!" So Clancy actually read it that way. And it was really, really fun. So really, it's not so much other, being part of the Empire, and they would always bring me in with the rest of the Rebel Scum. And they would put, it would be, Freddie and Vanessa and Tia, Taylor and Steve, and then I would be over separated. in the same room, but all the way over on the other side. And I think that was a conscious effort on their part to separate me from this really tight family. And at the end of season 4, the guilt that I had sitting in there, knowing what my character, and I won't spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it, but knowing what my character had done to disrupt the other side of the room was really, it affected me really deeply. You know, it was hard, but I loved when we were all in the room together. I mean, there's nothing like that.
Yeah, the casting of that show was kind of genius, and Dave Filoni, he's a genius in every area, but that was one of the areas that I think was particularly effective because we were that family that you saw on that show. We became that family. I felt like I was the big brother to Ezra, and Taylor and I still have that relationship. Every time I see him, I want to give him a noogie. And Vanessa as Hera, she was our den mother. She was the protector of all of us and kind of the glue that held us all together. And Freddie is, you know, our Jedi Master. He's also got that lunatic side of him, but he is my brother too. And Sabine, also little sister. We really became that family. So anytime we got to work together as a cast, that alchemy, that chemistry was always there. And we had so many amazing guest stars that would come in and out of there too. I think my favorite of all was probably Jim Cummings' Hondo. Just because sometimes they would let him go off on an ad-lib tangent and he'd just be hilarious. And now he's part of Galaxy's Edge. If you guys get a chance to go to Disney, either in Orlando or in LA, and check out Galaxy's Edge, he is the voice that you will hear as you're about to go on that ride. I don't want to spoil any of that for you, but there's an amazing full-body animatronic of his character that is just magical. It feels like we're doing the show all over again from the very beginning. But they gave us opportunities also when we had really important scenes with the other characters. They made sure that we were together in the booth as much as possible. And that doesn't always happen these days because of everybody's schedules. And I don't know if you guys remember that episode where Zeb and Callus were together on that moon. They actually had us in the room, and I was working with David for that. And he was a very quiet actor to work with. He's an on-camera, classically trained actor, and just wonderful to work with. But that chemistry really brought out something in both of us that brought that to a different level, I think. And I've never experienced that on a cartoon where we get to explore something like that in an enemy mine kind of situation, where we're really discovering the awfulness of our pasts and merging them and finding some commonality. And so it transcended being a cartoon at that point, and it went someplace much deeper and much more powerful. So there were so many moments on that show that were like that. Amazing comedic, wonderful, hilarious things that happened in the studio too, but also powerful, transcendent, personal things.
Oh, if you go to Galaxy's Edge too, save up and do the lightsaber experience. It's everything I wanted Harry Potter wand experience to be. It's amazing, it's magical, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and build a droid.
Yeah, you gotta build a droid. Like, spoil yourself like a guilty dad. It's worth it. It's so much fun. Seriously, it is so much fun and fully immersive. Fully immersive. There's nothing like seeing the Millennium Falcon right in front of you. Life size, there it is. It's kind of awesome.
And ask the cast members about their backstories, because everybody there,
Yeah.
Batu has created a backstory for themselves, and they will tell you they like to share that stuff. And they will never break character. It's an amazing
They
thing.
don't know what Disney is. They're like, what is this mouse you speak of? This is what I know not producing.
Yeah, I've never been anywhere else.
Yeah.
The force is with this mouse, yes.
So what do you feel, being Rebels cast members, all of you, do you feel that Rebels has had like an impact on Star Wars like as a whole? What impact do you feel like that is?
Well, as a fan, seeing this in the 70s, I was an apathetic teen, just graduated high school when the first movie came out. And I remember at that point in my life, I didn't really care about anything. I hated everyone, I hated everything. I just wanted to get out of school and do stupid stuff. And then I saw this movie, and it actually gave me something to care about. I was so excited. It was something completely different. It kind of shifted my perspective of what a film could be. And then all these years later, to work on something like Rebels that was actually real connective tissue for the franchise. It filled in a lot of the questions that I had growing up and watching the movies. And with such a love and affinity for everything that had come before, including all the Ralph McQuarrie designs that they incorporated into it. The design for Zeb was the original Wookiee. And he was basically a hairless version of that, and they actually made an action figure of that from Ralph McQuarrie's original design with the hair on it. And then somebody gave me one of those. I got it sitting on my desk. So to get to work on a piece of Star Wars canon history that really helps to complete the story on that level is just an incredible, humbling honor just to be a little part of that.
Yes, I felt also the cast was so well balanced. There was such a wonderful diversity among the cast, and that's, you know, carried itself forward into Resistance and into now the stories of Rey and Poe and Finn, and it just seems like there's always been sort of creature diversity in Star Wars, but Rebels was really the first one that now started to build it even more and more and more culturally and you know, representative of humans in that respect too, which I thought was fantastic. And there's nothing like being part of something that is a bridge between two times. And to see what I love what they do with the animation is that they're filling in the gaps in between and linking it all up. So, you know, just like with Marvel's universe, starting with Iron Man and going to Endgame, you can start with Phantom Menace and go all the way through and include animation and go all the way to where we are now with multiple animated series. It's kind of an amazing.
And they're starting to cross things over into the movies too.
Yeah.
Chopper showed up, and then Ghost showed up, and you hear Hera's voice in the movies, and I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, we've got Leia on Resistance and Poe, and you'll see all kinds of new characters as well. So.
Yeah, you mentioned connective tissue, and that's a perfect analogy for it, because it makes the movies, and if you're into the books, or the comic books, or the games, all of that stuff, and Rebels is just a huge part of that. And it really does make everything a little bit more meaningful, and the story even more meaningful. It's a great story, and it just keeps getting deeper and deeper the more you look at it. And I think that's what I love that the franchise allowed that to happen. You know, it's really been great.
Well, a lot of that is
an honor to be part of it.
A lot of that is due to Dave Filoni, and who was mentored by George Lucas directly. And so his love for him and his love for his vision is just apparent in everything he does. Every single thing that you saw in that show was well thought out and discussed, to the point of a fruit being introduced into the universe. When the Melu runs, I don't know if you guys remember that episode, when they first introduced that fruit, we had, I think, at least an hour, maybe a 2-hour discussion on how to pronounce it. Because we thought that once we did, that's canon, we've got to get that right. And they actually, to the point where people were having trouble pronouncing it first, especially in that one session, they actually brought in a dry erase board with a phonetic spelling of it. But it was that kind of detail. These guys, we were booked for 4-hour sessions. And sometimes Dave would come in and talk to us for an hour. Another full hour was a nerd battle behind the glass on the other side, with all the executives deciding how something should be pronounced.
That's what we should say. It's different dialect. My part of that planet says it differently. You know, I wish you could kind of get away with that.
Which is what they ended up doing for everything in the Star Wars universe anyway. Everything is pronounced.
Leia,
Han,
Potato,
Han,
yeah.
Everything.
Millennium Falcon, Millennium Falcon. Joe.
Darth Vader.
Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Sort of speaking of how everything is connected, I think all of you voice characters that have appeared in books and comic books, so how much do you keep up with your character in those kind of things, even after the show is over?
Absolutely zero. Sorry, I'm very sorry. I haven't had time to read up on it. I will when I retire, but I have not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, Timothy Zahn wrote the book on Thrawn, and it had all of Governor Price's backstory. I was like, wow, that's amazing. We finished recording that character last week. You know, so it was fun to sort of go back and realize, oh, okay, I didn't know any of this. And Henry Gilroy, one of our writers, was actually one who came in and said, "They didn't make her mean enough," compared to how we, you know. But it was interesting to read the justification for everything, all of her actions later on, after actually finishing recording it. So.
Quick question before he answers. Do you ever, like, when you're reading the book, do you just read the lines aloud in her voice ever?
Of course. But she's, heck, I read half the lines of my day for Governor Price. It's the weird thing about voiceover is that there's always, you know, someone going, "Well, aren't you snarky?" You know, I mean, I don't know. There's just, we all have all these characters living within us, and we just can't help it. We're just looking for a venue to get them out without being arrested, you know.
Probably the only reason we're not mass murderers because we haven't found a way to get us ever yet.
You voiced a lot of characters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do. I will try to do the research. Wikipedia is a very big friend of mine. You end up looking up the stuff, especially if you're doing like, you know, a Qui-Gon Jinn or something that's like an iconic character that you really should know. But if you really follow, I love the books. I love the comic books. I'm kind of a geek that way. So you do start to fill in the blanks. But after the fact, sometimes when there's a new character or like a solo character, I have to remember the name. You know, like, what was that? Oh, that's him. That's his name. Okay, what did he do? You know, I try to get as much info as I can before going in. And then, yeah, it's neat to try to look it up later and go, oh, he's a bastard. Okay.
So this is a fun question. If you could pick a book that's just about your character, a book or comic, what part of their life would you want it to be about?
I want the prequel to where Zeb, you know, where his people were decimated. I'd like to know what his life was like as a young Lasat, honestly, on his planet, when there still was something there. We just get little flashes of it in his dialogue and his conversations, but I really feel like I don't know enough about what happened prior to the time that he ended up on the Ghost.
I don't know, the book was pretty inclusive. Maybe her teenage years. Governor Price, the teenage years. She was her dating life. She was probably a mean girl. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's nice is that there is so much stuff. Now Freya, I have no idea at all about any of her, except that she's sort of over everything. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the teenage years of Price would be great.
For most of my characters, I just want to ask, who hurt you? Balls, what happened? I want to meet Balls' mom. You know, I want to know what General Tarples would be a real interesting comic book. I'd love to know, just in general, I would love a prequel to everything. I'd love to know, like, what happened with the Sith and the Jedi. I know we have a great Palpatine book, you know, and all that. I'm so fascinated with how did this Force thing get generated and why, you know, that some people take it on differently. I would love to see something like that. I know people sometimes get scared of prequels, but I'd love to see that book. You know,
Yeah, like was it
Yoda's story? Let's see that.
Was it ever a whole and then got split in two into dark and light? Was there ever a time in the Force where it was, and maybe you guys can answer this, where it was completely balanced and it had both sides converge
Well, the Sith are very old. The Sithari is an ancient thing, and they weren't all bad. You know, it wasn't until a later time, in Bates time, where we had to have one person have all the power.
Yeah.
So some people using their passion, it wasn't necessarily a terrible thing.
So
You know, so there's many
like
uses
the
of the Force.
Lannisters. Not all of them. They're like the Lannisters. Not all of them are bad.
That's right.
Just most of them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the Jedi were an order that came. You know, so it's like I'm just curious. Like, what was Yoda's story? You know, that would love to see that.
I would love to hear the story of the Sith when it wasn't this evil darkness, you know, and how it actually became that. That would be fascinating. So get out there and write this stuff, people. Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. That would be great.
Old Republic and go light side Sith.
Yeah. It's Sith light.
Sith light. Darth threat. Yeah.
Kind of changeless, soft hands.
Well, my next question was just how, you've sort of touched on this already, but how Rebels and working on Rebels into Star Wars is different than maybe other things you've worked on. You have like the longest IMDb I've ever seen. So you've all worked on other projects.
It's different because it was one of the very few things. I think there was Looney Tunes and there was Star Wars that affected me that deeply when I was younger. And to be able to work in that franchise and to know that whatever little contribution I'm making in that is part of canon is kind of an amazing thing because I know it's going to live forever. And I never know that about anything else that I'm working on. There's so many shows that I've worked on over the last 30 years that still I don't know if anybody's ever seen them. And I'm surprised when they do. But Star Wars is just one of those things. There's a reverence for the franchise that I feel, and a responsibility to the franchise to give everything that I have, even if I'm playing a stormtrooper with a 5-minute lifespan, I want that to really feel right, and I'll do it. I'll scream as many times as they want me to make sure that happens, whether it's in the games or in shows. So yeah, I think that's what really differentiates it from everything else, and just that level of care. I've never been on another show where the director of the show will actually come in and talk about not only the arc of what's going to happen for our characters, but how it affects society, because this is a cultural phenomenon. And what his vision is, what George's vision for this franchise initially was, and how it's our responsibility to carry it forward with that same intention. So that's rare in what we do. You don't see that a lot. We don't have time. We just don't have time or the money to do that. That's time is money. We walk in that studio, usually it's like, all right, you've got 2 hours, here's your lines, let's get through it as fast as we can, we'll give you as much context as we can, and go. With this, it's like, no, we have to get it right, because there are going to be people loving and hating this for centuries to come.
Yeah, it's our mythology. You know, they were all students of Joseph Campbell. You know, but then Tolkien, they just, all of those guys really wanted to have a long-lasting mythology and see, able to be into it for a long time, and you want to do it justice, absolutely.
Well, Dave used to say also, he said that, probably half of our audience is going to hate it, but they're still going to watch it.
Yeah.
So he wants to make it just as valuable for them too, to hate as hard as they want to on it, because it's still of value in terms of the culture of this.
Yeah, to be a part of a culturally connective tissue, which is what Star Wars is, what its great stories really are, and it connects us on a global level, more so than politics, more so than anything sometimes. And to be just a tiny little part of that, you've got to treat it with respect and fun, and but it has to be treated with respect and a little bit of awe.
And also, it's one of those shows where the stars of the original portion of the franchise are like superheroes to us. I mean, I think all of us have worked with Mark Hamill a lot, and every time I see him, I just kind of go, oh my God, I'm working with Luke Skywalker.
It turns into the Chris Farley show. You remember Star Wars? That's cool, right?
It's crazy. I worked on a bunch of episodes on Regular Show with him, sitting next to him, and they partnered us up. They do that often, and I still, every single time I walk into the room with him, I still have that same feeling. And with Billy D. Williams, and we see him at some conventions and things, and I rode in planes with him, and every time I would sit near him, I would just have that same little 8-year-old fanboy squeak inside. Carrie Fisher, when she was on the con circuit, we all got to meet her back then, and crazy, but it's just an amazing thing. If you get hugged by her, you were covered in glitter, and she just had this crazy, eccentric way about her, but she's a superhero to me.
She was like, I grew up, Disney princesses, everybody needs to be rescued by a man, and all of a sudden, Carrie Fisher comes along with Princess Leia, and I was like, finally a kick-butt, amazing princess. Like, she was my princess, and she still is, there's nothing like her, it's just, she needed to be rescued, and then she's going to rescue you right back. It's an equal opportunity, and everybody, it's just, yeah.
Well, you were talking about how it connects all of us. So, as a cast member, what was your first interaction with the fandom? Once you were in the cast?
I think it was Star Wars Celebration for me. I think. Yeah, because I went with to Star Wars Weekends in Florida with Steve before I was on the show, and then I went to Star Wars Celebration in Orlando, and that kind of blew my brain apart, because I was there as much, if not more so, of a fan than I was as a character. I just kept looking around and they're like, you have to sign, you have to go somewhere and actually work, and I'm like, but I don't wanna, I wanna go and look, there's Harrison Ford and George Lucas, and you know. So it's kind of amazing to be as much of a fan of something that I'm working on as everybody around me. So I end up just, you know, I mean, I have no words for it, but I think it was Star Wars Celebration, which was being thrown into the deep end of fandom, which was pretty fantastic. People coming up and just, there's nothing better than somebody coming up and saying, I hate you for what you did. And I'm like, thank you so much. That means a lot. It has made a difference. Yeah. So.
Yeah, for me, just before I had my first fan experience, D. Bradley Baker came into the studio. It was one of our last records before they had the first Star Wars weekends that I attended. And he goes, he had been part of Clone Wars. He played all the clones in Clone Wars and a million other things. And he goes, I really hope you take this in because your life is about to change. I went, really? Really? I know it's Star Wars and stuff, but really, what do you mean? He goes, you'll find out. And the next weekend, I went to Star Wars Weekends, and Rebels hadn't even aired yet. They just started doing a little promo for it, that little teaser out. And we go to Star Wars Weekends, and they put me in this convertible with a picture of Zeb on the side, and I got to ride in the parade, and I'm waving to people who have never seen my character do anything. And there's so much love from the beginning of the parade all the way to the end of the parade, and for that whole weekend, they just showered us with love, not knowing if they were even going to like it. So to be part of something like that on that level, it was so humbling just to see how connected the fans were. And it's a global connection too. There are people there from all over the world. And there was one family that would come and they would do a family reunion at Disney. And they would all dress up in Star Wars characters, and from grandma, who was like 90-something years old in a wheelchair, to brand new babies. And they had like 50, 60, 70 people in this family. And they insisted that I was part of their tradition. And they sat me down right in front, and they surrounded me, and they took this big family photo. And so I'm part of their history too, just because I had something to do with Star Wars, before they even knew if they liked or hated my character. And that was an anomaly to me. I had no idea that was happening. And part of a parade at Disney, I mean, you got to do that wave. It was crazy. It was just crazy.
Yeah, I'm sorry to repeat, but to be a fan of something as much as the other fans are is really astonishing. So I can sit there and talk to you guys about it for forever. And the Star Wars fans are the best. They're like the anime. They like know everything about every character and what's going on. It's truly amazing. It really is. Yeah. And an honor.
Do you ever get intimidated? Because I feel like Star Wars fans can be known for like being nitpicky. So do you ever get like intimidated by that?
The great thing about my character is that he doesn't really know anything. So I don't have to know anything. It's fantastic. And when I do, there's always an expert around that I can defer to. So I was the comedy relief on the show, so it made my job real easy. I was so grateful for that role. If I got to perform a character as intense as Kanan, for example, I would have to be more well-versed in the universe. And Freddie Prinze Jr. is a Star Wars geek, so he can handle that really well at conventions. And
Where's Wookiee ever?
yeah, well, and also they're very protective of the franchise too, so when we would do Star Wars panels, I think this is the first Star Wars panel we've ever done that didn't have to go through the whole permission process. And so when fans would come at us like that, we would have the buffer of Dave Filoni, who was really great at deflecting everything. And so it really wasn't a problem for me. I haven't really gotten much hate, fortunately. I know that some of us have. In the cast, but I personally haven't. Everybody, it's all seemed to be love, unless they're just not telling me.
Yeah, that's been my experience too.
No, I get a lot of hate, but for the right reasons.
Good right hate.
It's good hate.
Sure.
You know, I do. And if anybody ever comes at me, I just call them rebel scum. Call over a stormtrooper and escort them away. You know, it's very easy.
I did my job.
I did my job today. Yes.
fan questions? If anybody has.
Remember the weirdest question got the poster!
I have two of them.
We have a mic runner, so.
Is it all, they have to turn it on?
No, it's all.
Turn on the microphone, please.
Hi, I have a question for Mary.
Sure.
I thought it was really interesting to hear you say that Price was such an easy character for you because she was just evil. One of my favorite things about that Thrawn novel was how much it rounded her out.
Yeah.
And I know you just said that that all came out after you were done, but did you ever give it any thought afterwards about how you might have played that character any differently, maybe in the last season, if you had that kind of information?
Well, it was interesting because when we were doing it, and I'm not going to get into politics, but it was during the campaign, and it was really interesting to see a woman running, and I just sort of equated myself to what would it be like to be a woman who wanted nothing but power, and was ineffective at keeping it, and what kind of anchor would that create. And I didn't know the backstory as to why that was so important to her. And now knowing it, I really don't. I mean, she was, the one thing, again, it's all about intention. And her intentions were very clear. From the minute she walked into Moff Tarkin's office, she knew exactly what she wanted, and she knew how to do it. And that's why she wanted, I think it was the 9th Fleet, to give to Thrawn and everything else, to get this power. I don't think, because even if Henry and the writers didn't give her a sympathetic moment, and that didn't give her a moment really of vulnerability except in her own world of being ineffective. And there's nobody more dangerous than somebody that wants power, that is ineffective at it, that's still in a position of power. So that's kind of how I played her at the time. And I really don't think I would change it, because it would have changed the dynamic of everything else around me, and around the character, and around the happenstance of what occurred. So I think I would have played her exactly the same. You know?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this question is for Steve, who I'm glad I can say is older than I am.
Rub it in.
So, voice actors typically can point back to some mentor, like Bob Blank or Frank Oz or Edgar Bergen. And I was wondering who you would point back to as the person who influenced you the most toward becoming a voice actor.
That's a great question. Well, I was a huge Mel Blanc fan before I even knew that it was humans doing that. When I actually believed those characters were real, I was a fan without even knowing it back then. So he was probably the most impactful as a child. Once I realized that this actually was a viable profession, because I didn't know, I fell into this accidentally. The ones that I looked up to were people like Frank Welker, because I started in creature work and I was fascinated by his abilities, his amazing skill set. And I think the thing that really solidified him as sort of an unwitting mentor was working with him on Scooby-Doo. I got to work with him on Scooby-Doo. Walking into that room with Casey Kasem still in the cast, and it was just an amazing experience walking in there. But the thing that really solidified it for me was not only was he brilliant, but he's kind. And we find that to be true throughout our industry. Most people are. But Frank, the very first day I met him, we recorded and we went on a little break. And I came up to him and I had my little fanboy moment with him. And I said, I love your work, and I didn't even realize you voiced Free Willy and Flit and the Cave of Wonders and all these amazing things in all the Disney movies. And you're just a hero to me. I started in creature work, and I'll never be able to do a lot of the stuff that you do, but you're just a hero to me. And he said, you know what? He goes, here's my phone number. This could be a really difficult business, and if you ever have any problems or questions, or if you ever just want a little advice, here, contact me. And we've stayed friends since then. So he had a huge impact on my life. People like Fred, just one of the kindest humans on the planet. When I first saw him work, I was blown away by just the innate